Perfect. Just give it a few more seconds. There we go. I think we're good to go. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining the session today. Treading Uneasy Waters is the title of the session with regards to post-Brexit and what it means to you guys. Gabrielle, is it Michal?
Michal, yes.
Thank you. Have happily come along today to walk you through some case studies and really demystify it. I think after the last session, Gabrielle, there was so much interest and there were so many challenges and there were so many people in, uncertain times. And you've promised to present the fact that tax is fun, right? That was what we were talking about a few minutes ago. I'm messing around. But on that basis, it's nice to get out into the big wide world, isn't it? Go for things like cups of coffee and stuff. I don't know if anyone else has had the privilege, certainly in this weather, but that seems to be the theme of my week this week. But with that, I will hand over to yourself, Gabrielle, if that's okay.
Of course. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for having us back. We really enjoyed speaking to you all last time, and we really, really enjoyed the setup of the webinar. Michal is joining us today. I'll let her introduce herself once we get into the slideshow. But I did warn her that it was going to be a slightly different webinar where we could see all your faces and we could interact with you. So we are very excited to do that again today. So I'm just going to start sharing my screen. Let me know once you can see it. I'm just going to presentation mode. And yeah, to kind of give you a brief overview, I'll pass over to you, Michal, so you can introduce yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Firstly, thank you so much to the Chamber for having us and hosting us today. So my name is Michal. People do pronounce it in very fun and weird ways. Don't mind anything. Essentially, I'm the product development manager at VAT-IT, which we've now started working on Retrade, being a division of VAT-IT that specializes and focuses in, post-Brexit movement of goods, as well as making sure that import VAT is reclaimable, because of course that's a huge chunk which could completely increase costs. So I work on the product side, finding lanes, finding ways to make things move, and making sure that import VAT is recoverable. So very nice to meet you all, and again, thank you for hosting us.
I'm Gabrielle Magnani. I spoke with you last time around trading with the EU and getting goods in, moving seamlessly within the EU. I'm an import VAT and trade specialist, so hopefully the two of us together will be able to answer any questions and hopefully demonstrate to you how, I don't want to say the word easy because I don't want to be caught out, but how we can assist you in getting your goods into the EU in a pain-free manner, I should say. So just to kind of go over the agenda, we just wanted to recap some of the key points from the first webinar, actionable items, key considerations, keywords, supply chain, things that you need to be thinking about. Michal and I then decided that we'd take one business case each just to actually demonstrate and give you tangible examples of how we've assisted our clients in getting their goods into the EU. We wanted to make it clear for everyone that it's not really a one-size-fits-all when it comes to trading with the EU, and Retrade and VAT-IT as a company and what we stand for always do take that into consideration when we're dealing with each of our businesses, because we understand that each of them have different requirements and needs. And then finally, we'll just briefly touch on Retrade and hopefully, talk about how we can work with some of the association members such as yourselves. So just to kind of give you, an overview of what we've spoken about last time, we spoke about the different supply chain considerations that companies might now need to think about now that they're trading with the EU, moving goods into the EU, whether that be with Amazon FBA models, other Amazon fulfillment centers, trading purely B2B, trading with B2C, moving goods own use, all of these different, all these different routes to now sending goods into the EU, different variables and different things need to be considered. So we mentioned high-level VAT registrations, and we talked about how long those could potentially take to come back and how you would need to be mindful of that if you are looking to trade specifically DDP, maybe B2C, getting goods into fulfillment centers. All of these do require a VAT registration. And at the time we were saying these could take between 2 and 8 weeks, but as we've, come out the back end of Brexit, and a lot of people are now starting to consider that they need these registrations, we are seeing that, go towards the higher end of the 8 weeks, unfortunately, given the backlog and the pressures of COVID that some of these authorities are taking. Document consignment correctly. This is something that we have seen so much over the past few weeks. Michal and I have been analysing different documents, customs clearance and evidence to determine who actually is eligible to recover the import VAT. This is really important, if you are considering shipping DDP or you are considering recouping some of these costs, because that has to be done correctly. And if these aren't consigned correctly, that could result in penalties for yourself. And in some cases, it might also result in penalties for your clients, depending on the variations and the variables of each transaction. So something just to be very mindful of. This is something, one of our key questions. Michal will talk a little bit more about customs and what she's been doing with customs. It's very important that you understand who's clearing customs for you. Who is the person clearing, yourself being the buyer, the seller or the buyer, and then who is actually carrying out that customs clearance process for you, whether that's your freight or logistics partner, whether it's actually a broker, and in what way are they representing you? Are they being an indirect representative, a direct representative, all these kind of keywords that are being thrown out, but we do need to definitely know exactly what is going on during this process, because it's really key. This is, of course, sounds quite scary, but not as scary as it sounds. We work with a lot of businesses, and obviously compliance is key for all businesses, all shapes and sizes. We always hear about, the larger corporates and businesses that are in the news and getting fined because of GDPR and compliance breaches. But what we've noticed over the past few weeks is that every company, if they do have a VAT registration or a presence in a certain country, could potentially be audited by that tax authority and want more information in detail. So it's really important that you are, ready for those audit processes, and you put the necessary prevent the blockages happening, and you've just put the necessary steps in place to ensure that that's quite a smooth process, which is something, of course, that we can assist with. This is probably also a good time for me to also let you know that, not only would there potentially be tax authority audits, but a lot of you will know that customs can also carry out checks and audits on certain goods. They can request proof of payments, they can request POs, supplier invoices, and a lot of evidence. So you also have to make sure that your full audit trail from start to finish is checked out and makes sense, and you've got that there, because if there's just some discrepancy within what you've actually provided to the authorities and what's down on the paper, that could also throw a few hiccups into the equation. And then finally, the key thing that I've been banging on about this for months, and I know that I spoke around a lot of it last time I was on the call with you, is about marrying the three up. And I'm going to pass over to Michal to explain it in a little bit more detail, but it really is about, getting the short-term objectives, which is obviously getting the goods into the EU, but also ensuring long-term that you are complying with the rules, the obligations, and what's required in each EU member state. Everyone is different now. We're unfortunately not part of the gang, so we have to deal with all 27, and they all have their own set of rules. So do you want me to go over this in code terms, Michal, or do you want to chat through it? I don't mind.
Sure, I can go through it. Thanks, Gab. So essentially, and I'm sure this has been discussed briefly before, and everyone is aware of these so-called Incoterms, which basically define who's responsible at each stage of the shipping process, be it from the initial pickup to clearing customs to getting it to the final destination. And the two Incoterms that stand out are the DDP, the delivered duties paid, and then the DAP, delivered at point. And essentially what we found is that a lot of buyers in EU countries, they don't actually want to have any involvement in procuring goods. They want it to be just as it was pre-Brexit, because essentially the EU's got 27 other countries. They could rather say, okay, let me rather procure the goods from this country. We are not going to have to deal with customs. So that's where these Incoterms become so important for UK businesses, because a lot of customers want the DDP route, which essentially means that the seller, so you as the UK business selling goods into the EU, you take charge of everything from A to B, you clear customs, you incur that import VAT and hopefully recover it, but that responsibility falls on you. The goods arrive at your buyer's door and they're as happy as they were pre-Brexit. The second one is the delivered at point, where essentially the buyer usually assumes responsibility for the customs, and this is what we've seen a lot of buyers don't want to do. This is our main objection when our clients come to us saying, this is the objection we're getting from our clients, please help us. And when we speak more about marrying the customs and duties, you'll see why there is such a mismatch in the market, that if you actually want to sell DDP, it sounds like a simple thing. You want to do everything, you want to pay over the VAT and duties, you want to then reclaim it, you want your buyer to be happy, you want to do business in the EU, but there's a mismatch between what you want, what the legislation says, and what in practice customs brokers are actually willing to do for non-EU companies. So I think can we move on to the next? So this is my main focus on a day-to-day basis, the marrying customs, logistics, and VAT. So when we first, thought of Retrade and, thought of this solution to help clients, we first were like, okay, we need to help being a VAT reclaim business, we're like, we have to help our clients get that VAT back. It isn't as simple as getting that VAT back, because everything has to be 100% set up correctly. Documentation have to be designed correctly, filled in correctly. VAT registrations where needed need to be obtained. And again, that there's a big disconnect between customs brokers, customs law, and VAT laws. So essentially, even if you find a customs broker that does everything for you, so they'll do the shipping for you, then the brokerage is done for you. At the end of the day, we'll obtain the documents, and the documents will not have been cleared in a VAT-friendly manner, meaning that that full amount of VAT is often lost. It goes back into that indirect representation where so customs brokers in the EU are now, they don't want to take on the risk of representing a UK company that if something does happen with the goods later on, they won't be able to, find you. You're sitting in the UK, where are you? So I think that's, a key focus for Retrade is I've literally been going every day through the countries, finding brokers that I can sit and, form that relationship with, explaining exactly how the way our transactions are happening with our clients, why they should be cleared in that way, and why it actually is 100% compliant for customs and VAT purposes. So the marrying of the three of the, the customs, the logistics, and VAT is essential. You can have all the facts down on paper, but in practice, if you sending your goods through someone that just wants to get your goods through, the chances are your goods aren't going to be cleared in the right way. So they might get there very quick, but that cost is going to be completely sunk. And I'm sure a lot of you have seen that with the delivery duties paid shipments. So going back to those Incoterms, there's a lot of pushback from freight forwarders saying, we won't ship DDP for you because you're a UK company. It's just not possible. And we trying to build past that and finding the solution where it actually on paper it is possible. We need to make sure we can do it for our clients so that they can ship DDP. Their buyer doesn't have to do anything, and you as our client would get your VAT back. So that's essentially how that all loops in together. So keywords for businesses to consider post-Brexit. So there's a lot. I mean, I'm sure you've seen on on the internet and on other webinars. There are a fortune of buzzwords at the moment, and what we've picked up is that different different people, different clients, and different suppliers interpret words very differently. So, for instance, the word fiscal representative. We can get spoken to about a fiscal representative, and only half an hour into the call, when, you know, the facts start gathering, we realize that, you know, they're actually having an issue with an indirect representative, where the indirect representative is for customs, but the fiscal representative is for VAT. So that's what's worrying, that people, you know, the words are there, people are getting advice from so many different corners on all these different words, on the VAT registrations, the returns, the import VAT, the Incoterms. But at the end of the day, if not everything's married and together, you know, it's very, very hard to make your supply chain smooth and to make sure that you have covered each corner of the supply chain. And again, that, you know, you're not losing money where it is your money, you know, to get back. Another thing I just want to bring up again, or bring up with the VAT reclaim, we've also seen a lot of clients have come to us with their documentation from their customs brokers. And what we're in April now, so they've got 4 months worth of shipping, and they're like, we're a VAT reclaim company, please can you assist us in reclaiming this VAT? And we look at the documentation and we see they have been shipping DDP, but the documents aren't correct. And we've actually started helping our clients in, you know, actually speaking to the different authorities, making appeals to the authorities, saying, this is the reason why this happened. Brexit was so new. We need to, you know, find a way of reclaiming this VAT for our clients, because the transaction in substance should be reclaimable. And of course, there are teething issues with Brexit, and we are finding that a lot of the authorities are willing to, you know, change documents, or the customs brokers are willing to change documents where they see that an error has been made on their behalf. So that's it. Yeah, thank you.
Just a quick one on all of these words as well, just to, I also think that, as Michal said, you know, these buzzwords are thrown around so much when it comes to shipping and moving goods and selling goods and getting goods into the EU, and it was awfully more complicated than it used to be. But working with partners and companies that have been part of this for so long, and been doing this, you know, we've been specializing in moving goods for our US companies for a long time now, and we can kind of help you navigate all of the hurdles and all of the difficulties that you're facing to overcome and to almost understand what each of these mean. When I started looking into this, I couldn't believe how many different buzzwords there were and how many different boxes that you needed to complete, and why a fiscal representative was different to an indirect representative. So we're definitely here to help and to alleviate any of the stress or any of the problems that you're currently facing. I'll shoot straight into the case studies now, so we can show you exactly how we can help. So the first one is one of my clients. This was, what we wanted to do was highlight the different requirements of each of the case studies, just to show how we addressed it. The problem here was that our business wanted to remain compliant. They were very key on that point, and they were actually starting to consider whether they wanted to, you know, just to carry on shipping, to get the shipping out in a non-compliant manner. So we wanted to ensure that it was cost effective and maintaining the compliance. We wanted there to be flexible lead times because the clients were aware of difficulties with Brexit. So it wasn't as though they needed to have the goods there, you know, in the 12 hours after. So there was still flexibility around it, but we didn't want to kind of push them too hard. And yeah, we wanted there to be minimal admin for the seller and also the buyer. So we kind of worked together to come up with this. So to give you a bit of a background, the company is a third-party manufacturer and distributor. They have a site in Romania, and it's a completely separate entity. So the goods are shipped from Romania to the UK, and usually they use ex-works, which means that my UK client picks the goods up in Romania and ships them back to the UK. So they're doing the export clearance there, the import clearance in the UK, and dealing with all the, you know, in between as well. So post-Brexit, what would happen is the manufacturer would invoice the UK client and potentially charge Romanian VAT. We were still in talks with the Romanian authorities to determine whether or not, because it was technically an indirect export, where it was leaving Romania, whether it needed to be charged or whether it could be zero rated. For now, it has been being charged, and we are, you know, going back to the Romanian company to see whether we can get that reversed. because we can prove obviously that it is an export. So we can either, as I've mentioned there, either assist with recovering the VAT using a foreign mechanism called the 13th Directive mechanism, which allows cross-border recoveries of VAT when they're charged, between, as you can see here, from the UK to Romania. Or if this is something called an indirect export and the Romanian government are happy with the proof and evidence, we then go back to that Romanian company and say, please provide our company, UK company, the Romanian VAT that you charged them. They no longer need that. So that's one side of it. And then also when they're shipping to the UK from Romania, there's obviously going to be import VAT that's charged. So at customs, you pay the import VAT, which is obviously recoverable, but the duties are a sunk cost. Now, I'm sure a lot of you will be importing into the UK and you've, taking advantage of postponed VAT accounting, you're taking advantage of certain deferment accounts. That's always, something that you definitely need to keep an eye on. I know that a lot of people are now not receiving the C79s because obviously it's now become, a deferred VAT regime. So just make sure you keep an eye on your sheaf statements, make sure that the VAT does check out and cross-references with the commercial invoice. That's definitely something that you need to just keep an eye on. I've heard a couple of times that there has been discrepancy. So when you do get those sheaf statements, just check it out, make sure everything looks right when you're entering it into your VAT return. Just because you're paying it, you're not paying at the border, you still do need to reference that in your VAT return. You can obviously put it as an input and an output in the same return. So there's, cash neutral, but it definitely still needs to be recorded. So the other side of it was that they also manufactured goods in the UK. They took the goods from the Romanian, they, modified them, made them a little bit better, shipped them within the UK, but they also had clients all across the EU. And these were quite big pieces of equipment, lighting equipment, sound equipment. And so they were used, I think, in quite large arenas and stadiums across the EU. And the terms were in DDP because they would win large contracts. So to make themselves competitive, they would always have to, take care of the full end-to-end. This was obviously proved quite difficult moving forward because they were dealing with several different countries in the EU, and they were therefore, when shipping DDP and with the client correctly acting as the importer or the consignee, it technically means that you are making taxable supplies in that country. And that then, pushes the potential obligation for foreign VAT registrations. So all within the EU, the different 27 member states have different rules and regulations. And in some cases, you do require a VAT registration if you are making a sale in that country, but in others you don't. So there are simplifications in place, which allows you to take advantage of not registering that. The governments prefer, non-EU companies to not register so that they can chase the companies in their country for the cash should they need to. But that was great for my client because it meant that in those instances, they didn't need to register, they didn't need to carry out the filings, there was, limited compliance, and they could ship directly to the client, reducing, getting back to those flexible lead times. They pay import VAT at the border, and then we assist with recovering that for them, again, using this foreign mechanism called the 13th Directive. Having said that, though, there's obviously a whole load of other countries whereby you do need the VAT registration, in order to sell. So what we suggested that we would do, I'm just going to flick to the next slide because it's on here, is use one member state as an entrance point into the EU and then allow the goods to be, move within free circulation. So we decided on France, given that the majority of goods moved obviously via road. It allowed them to, cross at Calais, clear into the EU, and then subsequently transfer the goods to other member states and other businesses across the EU. We also, have in the process of setting up a deferment account for them in France, whereby they, when they actually cross the border, they don't need to pay upfront for the import VAT. we take care of the registration and the filings for them, and we ensure that all of these transactions of crossing the border is recorded in that French VAT return. And also we can just ensure that there's, everything's taken care of. The subsequent sales that happen from France to the other companies are also recorded in there as well, and we're assisting with the intrastat movements. So just to, I've probably spoken over all of these points within my explanation, but yeah, it just means obviously that they're not paying upfront for any import VAT, which is great for the cash flow of the business. They can utilize this license to the countries where they don't want to ship directly and go via, but in some cases they can also ship via direct. So it's just quite a clean way of working, having one entrance point and not having to deal with several different registrations. And as they're using road as their main form of transport, it's easy to get the goods in and then they can distribute from that point. So we've just, helped them with all the setup of that. We've helped them with procuring the license, but now they are incurring import VAT while we set everything up. We're going to assist them in reclaiming that once the registration comes through. And as Michal says, we've built the solution to marry up customs, logistics, and VAT compliance.
Perfect. Thank you, Gab. So this case study builds on one of my current clients. And essentially, they came to us because they literally had, I'm sure many companies have had this, but they had a stuck shipment and in the EU, and obviously their client wanted their goods. It was actually a case of supply and install, so they couldn't, come and do the installation until they knew the goods had arrived. So the whole, it was just their whole that section of the EU business was, on hold. And essentially, when we looked at, went through what their objectives were following Brexit and what they actually wanted, because of course there are, way ups that have to happen because of all the different parts of the supply chain and the different authorities involved. But essentially, their three main objectives were to, one, have speedy delivery to their customers. So they, the via route that Gabs was just speaking about, they didn't want that. They wanted to make sure that where their goods could ship directly into that, into that country. If that meant registering, obviously it's very difficult to the thought of, being registered in another country. It can be seen as an administrative burden, but they were still, okay with having to register because they wanted that speedy delivery. The second thing is, so that their clients, it was almost like sporadic. So shipments could come up or contracts could come up in random countries in the EU. So they couldn't from the get-go, like say, these are the countries I want to be set up in. They wanted to know that if they needed to win a contract, say in Romania, they had everything in place, even in a year's time, everything in place to win that contract in Romania. They wanted flexibility to continue trading and of course, cost effective. And I think that, is at the forefront of a lot of businesses' minds. A lot of companies, if they feel like it isn't going to be cost effective, they actually have said to us, maybe we should just stop doing business with the EU. So cost effective, very important. So what happened? They came to us. They're a company that supplies office equipment to shared work environments across the EU. And we also, have later found out as our relationship's been building, but they also offer, they also have contracts in other countries outside of the EU. So it was actually, we picked up that there was a worldwide, compliance situation going on where before they were just shipping into the EU, or take the EU out, but shipping into all these other countries and, not actually thinking of the VAT or GST compliance issues. So they were servicing a combination of services and goods. So basically, again, the supply and install, and they wanted to ship DDP. So there wasn't a question about it. They didn't want their buyers to have any extra stress, burden, or cost. They wanted to win the contracts. So they wanted to be doing everything. And they had gotten previous advice saying that they actually had to register in majority of countries. So even though, they were happy to be flexible, when you hear something like that, you can get quite a fright, because registering in 27 countries, having a fiscal obligation in 27 countries can be quite daunting. So essentially what we did, we analyzed their supply chain in detail, looked at past contracts that were coming up, previous shipping documents, spoke to their shipping agents, etc. And we identified that their main contracts were with Ireland, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, and France. And then we actually looked at per country. As Gab said, every country has their own specific requirements and their own simplification measures if the legislation's looked into, deep enough. And we actually saw that there were a few countries where, yes, they would have to register in, but there were also countries where they would never, assuming legislation doesn't change, they wouldn't have to register in. So after the comprehensive audit was done, we identified again that this was a supply of goods. The VAT law, basically, if there is more than one supply being made, so if it's a supply of goods and services, there's a requirement to actually assess what are you actually doing from a VAT perspective. Are you supplying a good or are you supplying a service? So we saw that they were supplying goods. And then just before we started shipping and we started to see the HS codes, we saw that they were actually shipping dual use goods, which require an export license. And what dual use goods are, basically they're goods that can be seen. So governments can see these goods as being capable of being used for military and dangerous for danger, which can cause harm, to countries, to people, etc. Or they can simply be used for, technology purposes, computers, to increase work, to increase your business. So essentially, based on their HS codes, which are the commodity codes, we identified that they needed this dual use license for export purposes, and we were able to procure this for them. So the VAT registrations, and I think I have spoken a lot of this, but there were registrations required in Ireland and Germany, and we then gave a list of the simplification measures for the countries that did allow it. And of course, with these simplification measures and with the registrations, there also is the invoicing and paper trail that goes with it. So we assisted them in that setup. Of course, because it was identified that they could ship direct to certain countries, that decreased the lead time to clients, both from the goods having to move to clients, as well as the fact that they didn't have to wait for those VAT registrations in order to start shipping. The next thing we considered was, again, in the spirit of marrying everything together, we looked at the customs clearance, obtained the EORI number and the dual use license, making sure that whenever the first shipment was leaving, everything was set in stone. They actually did their shipping through us as well, so we had that all loaded on system, so everything was good to go. And then the instructed the freight forwarders to complete documents correctly. So again, this for me is absolutely vital, and it's because customs broker, because there's been such an uptick in the customs work that they're doing. A lot of these customs brokers actually weren't doing that many before, because there wasn't a customs brokerage between the UK and the EU. What we found is, even when you give them strict instructions that this is how it needs to be cleared, they often still, because everything's being done so fast and there's so much pressure, we still get the documents back and see that they actually weren't consigned correctly. So obviously we do try to give big pre-alerts and strict instructions to make sure that that is done correctly. This will also ensure that there's no hold up at customs, and that the goods just go smoothly through. If like an explanation is needed, it is there. And lastly was the compliance, and with the compliance comes the audit points, and a few of our clients actually have already gone through their first audits, which is quite a scary word. But when you've got everything set up in a manner where if an audit comes, you've got your paper trail, you've got your explanations, you've got everything, it does just make business and life much smoother. So from a compliance perspective, we in the process of maintaining their VAT registrations, and of course we scrutinize every single document that comes through, be it their sales invoices, which we assisted them in constructing, all the way down to the import documentation. We analyze every single document, and if we do pick up an error with a customs clearance document, if it's in the right time frame, do request that it does get amended to reflect the actual facts of the transaction, so that that import VAT is reclaimable.
I think quickly, if I can just jump in, I was mentioning to Ollie earlier, I think last time that we spoke to you as a chamber, there was a lot of questions around Amazon FBA and shipping goods into Amazon fulfillment centers. Unfortunately, I made a bit of a slight error and completely forgot that until I literally got on the call. But we have been able to assist, multiple clients now getting their goods into Amazon fulfillment centers. I know that there's been difficulty dealing with Amazon, especially because they are they won't act as the importer of record, and they only want to deal with companies that are shipping DDP. We have managed to overcome all these hurdles, get the goods into the fulfillment centers, assist with recovering the import VAT, and removing the hurdle that is the importer of record by making the company its own importer of record and therefore checking everything out. So I did just want to flag that because it leads quite nicely into the next part where, we obviously would love to speak to anyone that has any questions. We can obviously open the floor up now if anyone does have any questions, but I know that there are quite specific questions that have been asked in the chat, which I do think that we can provide insights on, one specifically around Spain and the other around Germany, which are two quite difficult customs agencies to deal with. But yeah, we offer free consultations to all of our chamber members. So we'd absolutely love to have a chat with any of you. I think following this, Ollie will probably send our details around. You can email us and we'll book some time with you to talk about any questions or queries that you have.
That's awesome. And with regards to some of those questions in the chat, do you feel that's something you want to pick up now, or around the kind of Germany seems to be the place where a lot of things seem to get stuck at the moment? I don't know if that's by design.
Germany is it's a difficult one because there's quite a lot of rules when it comes to importing with URI numbers. You have to have a certain, they like to have a German URI number. There's obviously going to have to be the indirect representative when they're moving goods. And I've also heard that German authorities have prevented a certain number of shipments per annum unless the company meets certain requirements and variables. We have come up with ways though that are all fully compliant, obviously, to allow goods getting in. But this one specifically is around returning goods and businesses, I imagine, refusing to complete the EAD forms, which are, they export basically the export forms when you do an export declaration. So I mean, that one sounds quite specific because I don't understand, I don't know all the detail around what the goods are, whether it's to be repaired, is it under warranty, what's the reason for returning the goods, and then we obviously figure out a way, hopefully, that we can assist the client in getting the goods out of Germany. Sounds like they've taken hold of them a bit.
So it sounds like Alison needs to reach out for the consultation around, that particular process. For
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
And then, carry on, sorry. Oh, okay. I was going to say the second one is around Spain, and that's actually Michelle's speciality. Well, not speciality, she's got tons of them, but we've been doing quite a lot of work in Spain. So, yes. Do you want to take this one high level?
Sure. Let me just read it.
In the meantime, just there's a question from Dominic. Sorry, just while Michelle looks at that, which is what are the criteria for whether it's necessary to register for VAT if you're exporting to Ireland or any other EU country?
As Michelle reads that, I'll just give you a brief overview. So as we were mentioning, some EU member states suggest that if you are making sales within that country, they want you to register for VAT. So Ireland is one of those. So if you are seen to be importing goods into that country and subsequently making a sale, the Irish tax authorities want to know about that. They want a VAT registration, and they want to see all of the transactions on that VAT return. You don't have to have a physical presence or anything like that. It simply is just a VAT registration to show all of the transactions. Having said that, though, Other member states, such as France and the Netherlands, don't require that VAT registration. There's no real criteria, unfortunately. It simply was just a question from the, I think the governing body of the EU essentially asked all 28 member states at the time whether or not they wanted to take advantage of this simplification mechanism, which prevented non-EU businesses for registering in that country. And I think there was about 20 that said yes, or 15 that said basically half and half. Half said yes, half said no. So it really is just a case by case, unfortunately. There's no real kind of recipe, I'm afraid.
Not standards based in any way, shape or form is really where we're going with this.
So then just in terms of the question that I've been asked from Paul, so this has come up, unfortunately, in the last few weeks with the Spanish, it's essentially a Spanish fiscal ID. And basically, in practice, Paul, you're 100% correct in saying that you should be able to ship using an EU EORI number. And even a UK business address if it's your EU EORI number, that should be more than enough, to ship the goods into every single EU country, provided you do have that indirect representative, because you are a non-EU, company doing business in the EU. Spain is unfortunately much stricter, and I've spoken to numerous, different Spanish tax advisors and lawyers about this. And essentially, they do require anyone who is shipping to have a Spanish fiscal ID, and depending on the type of the type of supply you're doing, that Spanish fiscal ID or VAT number will be a full-blown Spanish VAT number where you have to do the filings, and you almost you have to do the filings, charge alpha VAT on your Spanish invoices, etc. But there are also certain instances where it's the same number, the Spanish VAT number, that you don't have the obligations of doing that filing. So essentially, you would very similar to getting a Spanish VAT registration. The process is very similar, and that is something that we do offer at the moment, because all our clients, or most of our clients, did need it. But essentially, there isn't that. In a lot of instances, there isn't that huge criteria of doing the VAT registration. The other consideration that I'm just looking at here is that, so the import of record, it's a word that's used differently by different people. As I said, everyone's got their own interpretation, and essentially, just on the VAT and who the import of record is, we always need to make sure that it's aligned, that the owner of the goods is the import of record, because it's them that's actually able to reclaim that VAT. So just, often when there are subsidiaries involved and are different companies involved, even though you are able to get the goods in and reclaim the VAT, we have had instances, actually just recently, I think last week, where there was a mismatch and ownership, the party that owned the goods wasn't actually the party, wasn't reflected for customs purposes, and the VAT reclaim was questioned. So, that's just a side note, but the Spanish fiscal ID is unfortunately something that you will require.
Awesome. And at the moment, in order to be able to file for VAT, you were saying earlier, you allow up to 8 weeks for that to be processed. Is that right?
Yes. So this Spanish VAT number we've seen can take basically, there is a notary and an apostle part of the process. So depending on how efficiently and quickly that can be done, I think the time at the moment is about between 4 and 5 weeks, I'd say. Obviously, things happen, though, delays happen, but that is essentially where Spain is. I don't know, they've veered off from the rest of the EU.
Okay. There's another follow-up question from Dominic, which is, if I sell DAP to Ireland and my customer is the importer of record, do I need to register for VAT in Ireland? Basically, without seeing anything, the general principle is no, you won't have to register for VAT in Ireland. The key there, though, is making sure that your customer knows that they are going to be reflected as the importer of record, and that they are the only one that can actually get that import VAT back. So if, for instance, you are uncharging those costs to them,
again, there could be a mismatch of sorts, but on the basis that, you know, they're the importer of record, they're owning the goods at customs. And again, contracts could stipulate differently. So this is without seeing the contract. It would be, you know, could be quite likely that you wouldn't be required to register for VAT in Ireland.
In those scenarios, though, there obviously does need to be a handoff, usually to a broker. DAP usually signifies the fact that the customer would then have to sort out, typically, this is obviously not in each case, typically have to sort out their own broker to clear customs and, you know, pay over the import VAT and duties, and subsequently allowing them to reclaim that.
Excellent. Are there any other questions?
Yes, perhaps I could just come in. The vast majority of our customers, and this is Europe-wide, are not VAT registered. So they're small clubs and organisations. If they're not VAT registered, what we used to do in the past was just charge 20% UK VAT, and they accepted that and they didn't reclaim or anything. What would be the situation now? Sure.
So essentially, assuming they're not VAT registered because they're actually almost exempt from VAT, so, you know, there's no obligation on them to register.
That's correct.
So essentially, they would then be seen as, instead of being selling to business, where the business can reclaim the VAT, they'd be seen as selling to business to consumer for VAT purposes, and that's exactly what you're saying, that they couldn't reclaim that import VAT. And because you would be seen as making sales to a consumer, you'd actually need to assess the B2C rules as opposed to the B2B rules, because all the you know, the different authority, obviously with the B2B instance, it's much and the flow is almost a bit smoother, because at the end of the day, the government wants to get the VAT from the final consumer down the line, whereas here you would be selling to the final consumer down the line. They can't reclaim it. So B2C rules would have to be looked at, which could, they're a little bit more, they are stricter. Well, not strict is not the right word. They do require registrations in more countries than a B2B transaction. Obviously, there are thresholds, but we have seen that a lot of those thresholds have been dropped to zero, which may require VAT registration. Obviously, we would need to see the full facts on it, but essentially it would more fall under the lines of B2C as opposed to B2B.
Okay, well, perhaps we can show you the facts, and we'll be in touch.
Sure.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any questions for Gabrielle or Michal? Alison, is it worth picking up on your second message? Sorry, I've missed between the two threads there, where the goods were sent out for service but were not needed.
Yes, sorry. Hi. Yes, so what it is, we have a German service engineer in Germany, and he went to the company. It's a big company, and we sent a lot of stuff there. One item from our partner in Italy and some goods from here. He didn't need them. He managed to fix it, and we arranged to collect it with a freight forwarder who has always dealt with all our customs before, never been an issue at all. And it's taken 2 months. It's just sat there and sat there and sat there. The customer will not share their EORI number, and is refusing to help with the customs. And basically, that's it. They've just sat there. The shipper we use is one of the ones mentioned on the government website to broker customs. And they've just said they couldn't do it. They just can't do it. And so they've cancelled it. They've now cancelled it. And our goods are sitting in Germany worth thousands of pounds, and we need to get it back.
I'm sorry to hear that. Again, Germany there are a lot of horror stories with goods being stuck there. There really are. I'm just thinking, sorry, Gabs, go.
I was going to say, but it sounds to me like there's no sale occurred. You didn't sell those goods. There was no need for them anymore.
No, that's right. No sale. They were just left there by the service engineer for us to collect.
So what I'm thinking, Gab, it sounds like from an export of record perspective. So obviously there are two sides to customs. There's a customs side when the goods leave a country, so the export of record, the export documentation, and then the import. And for both sides of the transaction, you need to have someone acting as exporter, and then on the other side, someone acting as importer. And to act as exporter, like you said, you would need the EORI number of, it usually is the owner that facilitates that exporting. And obviously your client doesn't want to, even though they're not the owner of goods, you thought that they would act as exporter. Have you asked the customs broker if you can use your EU, do you have an EU EORI number?
Yes, we have the Netherlands one and we have a UK one. And we are now, because our goods are stuck in Germany and we do have a branch in Germany, we're now applying for a German one as well. I suppose we will now need to get a Spanish and an Italian and everyone, because we export to everybody.
So the EU, so you actually only, in the EU, the system only allows you to actually get one EU EORI number. The Spanish fiscal ID is a completely separate, no, I don't want to confuse anyone, it's a completely separate thing to the EORI number. So you're not going to have to get one in Italy and all these other countries. Spain is very much so, they want you to have some form of fiscal number there that has nothing to do with customs. But in terms of your German export, I would suggest speaking to them to see if, you know, there's another party, if they would allow you to actually act as the exporter of record, or if they require a German established entity, because that could be the mismatch as well. They might want a German entity to act as the exporter of record, which again is complicated because your client doesn't want to give their EORI number. The other thing you should ask them is perhaps they will allow you to be the exporter of record if you have an indirect representative. I'm not sure. That's what I would go back and speak to them about. We're more than happy to take this offline with you and get to the bottom of it. But
we have asked that. We have asked.
Yeah, and they don't. They still don't want to.
I went to the I went off piste a bit, and I went to the head of the custom broker, to the top manager, and said, here's the email trail over the last 2 months. Can we act? Because we've been told by your guys that we can't. And he said, as we have a German branch and a German VAT number, and are applying for a German EORI number, they will accept that and will act on our behalf now as our exporter.
Okay, so they just wanted that again in country. They didn't want to act on behalf of a non-EU company.
Yeah. It's just all weird. I mean, they were the company that took it out there for us, and we booked the return with them. And we had actually questioned, will this be an issue if the customer, because we know the customer refuses to share their EORI number, and they said, no, it won't be an issue. And it is. But
so sorry,
even on Monday, we had TNT refusing to send anything back from Germany that we'd collected. Exactly the same thing. They wouldn't send it, even though they've done it many, many, many times before. And we had to, that's when we applied for the German EORI number. And just having that application form sent to TNT, they accepted it and have allowed it to go through customs and come back to us.
Okay,
so this is new.
Yes, Germany is a notoriously very strict and almost, I don't want to say set in their ways, but they, again, it goes back to the fact that, the legislation doesn't say, says you don't need to be, VAT registered for goods to leave. But I guess it sounds like you are slowly sorting it out though.
Yeah.
Michal, I think we can maybe talk to our teams internally on the logistics side and see what their thoughts are on it.
Yeah, definitely.
It'd be really interesting because it is a new thing, because we have most of our business is in Germany. And we've gone through all of this issues, all the different issues since January with Brexit. And we've managed to actually glide through quite well. And this is literally the last 2 months now with this particular one, but that was the customer. It's really been the last 2 weeks. It's just sat there.
That's very frustrating.
Have you got a VAT registration then, Alison?
We have. We're VAT registered in UK, France and Germany.
Okay. And you have the subsidiary in Germany?
Yes, and France.
Okay, cool. Okay. It's a minefield, and I don't think anyone quite knows what each. I don't even know if they know on what's going on. I think they just pick it on the day. But hopefully we can assist with some. Yeah, if you want to arrange a call, we can take it offline, Alison, and we can figure out exactly what's going on.
Excellent. Thank you, Gabrielle and Mikhail. Just to finalise, I've got one last question. Does good weather, beer gardens of an evening, make all of this slightly easier to deal with?
No. It actually makes it harder.
It does make it harder. Because it makes it harder, because then there's the guilt knowing people we need help.
No, not seriousness. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for taking a lot of those questions. And to take this offline, please reach out for the free consultation. And again, really appreciate your commitment to the Chamber and offering that consultation service as well, because it sounds like a real minefield. It doesn't sound like there's a one size fits all or will ever be. So on that basis, I just wanted to say thank you very much for coming on today.
No, of course. Thank you for having us. We actually really like this webinar because we get to see some of your faces.
Yeah,
so
I liked it.
We get to talk to you. Loads of the other webinars, you only talk over chat. So it's been lovely speaking to you all, and hopefully we'll get to speak to more of you on these consultations. Yeah,
definitely. And we'll share around, as always, contact details, also the video recording. And at the same time, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Bridge, because I believe this is your last session, isn't it, Mr. Bridge?
Well, it's a situation, of course, where I'm stepping down as Chief Executive of the Chamber at the end of next week. Delighted Vic Annals, who's on the call, is taking up the cudgel to drive the Chamber on. But I shall still be around and involved in other aspects. And as I tell everybody, I will only be visible when Vic wants me to be visible. Other than that, I shall be working behind the scenes. So it's been really good, and all these sessions. And I think it's grateful thanks to Gabrielle and Mikhail for their excellent presentation today. And as has been described several times now, it's a minefield that people are having to get through. But the key thing from my perspective is to make sure that we do get as much expert help and advice as we can. And so that's why I'm delighted that there's an offer of a free consultation, which Sadie has said in the chat that she will obviously be sending around tomorrow, so people can link on it and make their arrangements to have a chat direct with you, so that they can overcome that. And I think on this occasion, I really need to give a great big thanks to Ollie, because Ollie's been with me through all of these sessions for the local business champions and global trade champions, expertly chairs all the events and takes the strain completely away from me, which is really very grateful for, and thanks indeed. And of course, everybody that comes and joins onto these sessions, we very much hope that they are of benefit, and that they will give you some of the answers that you need to navigate your way through all these challenging situations, when I think all of us are learning all the time about how we need to circumvent some of these challenges. But I know that with Gabrielle and Mikhail, we've got some experts who will help you to actually find a solution to the challenges which I know many of you are having. So anyway, thanks for being with us, and I'm going to hand back to Ollie now with grateful thanks.
Thanks, John, and thanks for wrapping it up. And it's been an invaluable series. I've learned a lot throughout this, so it's also been interesting to hear other people's side of the story, which is also challenging as well. Vic, did you want to wrap up this session? That kind of seems fitting.
Well, I mean, look, it's really difficult because obviously it's a huge loss to us all to be saying goodbye to John. But of course, all of us are still going to benefit from having him around. As he says, he's not disappearing. And I do want to thank not just our fantastic experts and you, Ollie, as well, but I want to thank everyone for joining, because that's why we do it, because It's to make sure that we're giving all of you the support and the help you need. And please do take up the offer of the free consultation, because it's easy to disconnect from this call, get involved in 1,000,001 things and get distracted. But no, please do, because I think, it will be of help, because this is just so complex. And look, John, I'm sure everyone will join me in thanking you so much for your 17 years of dedicated service. And it's not your last day, but this is your last one of these calls. So thank you very much for all you've done. Thanks, Ollie.
Thank you, John, as well. And then finally, John, you've got to come back and heckle and ask some really awkward questions and take the session off piste and generally just be a nuisance. I think you've got a free reign to do that now. So, but I've very much enjoyed it. And also thanks to Sadie, just to finally wrap up, for organising them all, because without her back office skills in getting all these events organised and the logistics and pulling subscriptions together and promoting it on social media, again, none of this would have happened. So thank you again to Sadie. With that, have a fantastic rest of your day. The weather is good. I do suggest a beer in a pub garden or a glass of white wine at some point. It seems to be quite a novel thing to do at the moment. And with that, have a good rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone. All the best, John. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.